Hey there, this is Ross Izzard. This is the Backcountry Fly Fishing Podcast, where we talk about fly fishing and when you shouldn't go fly fishing. This week's episode is a little different than the last couple weeks. We spent the last two episodes talking about high alpine lake fishing. So how to time your trips so that you can be successful, how to bring the right gear, which flies to use, tactics to use, all of that stuff. And that was fun. It was good. I mean, I've been spending a bunch of my time this summer doing high alpine lake fishing, which is awesome, especially during this real limited window that we have. We've talked a little bit about how you decide a go or no go when you're making the decision to take one of these trips and hit the mountain and hike. But today I want to talk about something a little bit deeper, and that is what you do when the mountain says no. And by that, I mean when it's just not your day to be up there. There are a lot of days that you can be up there and having a great time, right? The sun is shining, the conditions are great, everything's lining up for you. And that's perfect, right? I mean, if you can be up there, you should be hitting the trail and hiking your butt up there because the window is just, it's so small that you don't want to miss any days. I totally get that. I totally understand how much planning goes into these trips. I mean, I go at least one day a week, sometimes 2 days a week. It often takes quite a bit of planning to find the route, find the lake, research the place, make the plan, get the gear. If you're backpacking, that's even more stuff you got to think about. And so you're pretty invested by the time those days roll around, and you really want to make sure that that investment pays off by at least you managing to make it to the lake, or even better, make it to the lake and catch an awesome fish, or maybe 50 awesome fish. Better still. But sometimes you're just not supposed to go. And there are a lot of reasons for that range from physical to mental to emotional to circumstantial to who the hell knows. But the truth is, the more that I have done this, the more that I have spent large sections of my life chasing fish in far off places, including on top of mountains, down in really deep canyons, anywhere really that you can think of, I have come to believe that there are days where the wild and the mountain just says no. You're just not supposed to be there that day. It doesn't want you there. It knows you're not supposed to be there. And you know deep down that you're not supposed to be there. And learning to listen to that little voice in your head. And I know this kind of comes across as a little, woo-woo or hippie. And that's okay. But the reality is that these are living places. And just like we talked about in season 1, they speak to you in really interesting ways. They connect with you in really interesting ways that go way beyond just the physical act of being there and hiking there and fishing there. They have souls and they have characters to them. And sometimes they just don't want you up there because it's not good for you more often than not. And so this week's episode is all about what you do when the mountain says no. And I should clarify, it's not just the mountain. It's really anywhere that you might be going that's off the beaten trail or potentially even on the beaten trail. They're just times that you need to be paying attention, and it might be time to call off the trip. And so we're going to talk about that today. Some of them are not going to surprise you, and you're going to kind of roll your eyes and say, oh, well, yeah, duh, Ross, of course you shouldn't go in that situation. But some of them are a little bit less obvious, and kind of like we've been riffing on for a good chunk of this season, I really do believe that quite a bit of this stuff doesn't get talked about enough in the outdoor community, and certainly not in the fly fishing community, because it's considered kind of a faux pas to talk about your emotions or your mental state, or even to pretend like you have emotions or a mental state, because we're all supposed to be big, tough, rugged men. Or rugged people, because women can be pretty rugged too. And I think that sucks, because your mental state and your emotional state play just as much of a role in your success or failure and safety out there in the wild and on the mountain as any set of physical circumstances do. And there's something that you need to be paying attention to, because if we're going to be out there chasing ghosts, growth, and grace, we need to do that in a way that is connected with what we've got going inside. I mean, let's be real. We're going out to these places in large part because it helps us process and develop the stuff inside. And the inverse is also true. Sometimes the stuff inside has an impact on whether or not we should be in those places. And that's worth talking about. So If you're not into that, you're kind of you're too big and too tough for it, then cool. Skip this episode, come back and we talk about fishing again. But if you're in it for the spiritual aspect and the self-development aspect and the ability of the wild to help you process and move through and grow as an individual, this one's for you. And I think it's an important one because it'll definitely save your day one of these days, and it might save your life one of these days. So let's hit it. I'd like to start with a story, and this is a recent story from this summer. Most of you probably know that my general modus operandi is I will pick a wilderness area every summer. There are a whole bunch of these in Colorado, 42, I think. And every summer I pick one, and I do my very best to explore that thing in as much detail as I possibly can over the course of the summer. Now, these are pretty big areas, so sometimes it takes me more than one summer. Creeks, streams, lakes, hikes, mountains, whatever. I spend a lot of time mapping these out, hiking to these places and exploring them because it kind of gives me a target and an objective to work on. So this summer, it is a wilderness area that is up sort of in ski country here in Colorado. A little lesser known wilderness area. It's not quite as big or as sexy as some of the bigger name ones. But it is stunning. It's gorgeous. It's all centered around this incredibly rugged range that has these beautiful little creeks that are stuffed with brook trout and cutthroat, tons of high alpine lakes that range from well-trafficked and well-known to never heard of and not even named on maps, many of which hold cutthroat trout, and just some of the most spectacular views I've ever seen. I mean, I've seen a lot of mountains. I spent a lot of my life in the woods and on the mountain. Man, the views in this place are off the charts. And no, I'm not going to tell you where it is because spot burning sucks, and we're going to talk about that here in a couple of episodes. But I do want to just bring that up because I am working my way through this wilderness area. And one of the lakes that's been on my list there is a lake that sits just about at 12,000 feet, and it is a gnarly, gnarly hike. It's about a 3.5 mile hike, which doesn't sound bad, right? Easy day trip territory, 3.5 miles. And then you look at the vertical gain, which is 4,000 feet over those 3.5 miles. And most of that is concentrated in the first 2 miles. So it's a gnarly hike, right? I mean, I don't know how familiar all of you are with those hiking figures, but anything pressing over 3,000 feet of vertical is quite a big hike. Once you get to 4,000, especially in a distance that short, that's like you're walking on your tiptoes steep. It's a rough one. And because it's such a rough hike, you got to allot extra time. And because, like we talked about in the timing episode, you are going to have pretty big and powerful storms coming across those mountains most afternoons. That means you've got to be starting really, really early. Okay, so like to do a day hike like this, you need to allot probably 3 to 4 hours to get to the lake at least, counting breaks and everything like that when you just can't go any further on a slope that brutal. That means you're probably going to start hiking at about first light, and that was my plan. So I made a plan. I was going to go up. I was going to stay in a little mountain town, not too far, maybe 20 minutes from the trailhead. No, I didn't camp this one. If I know that I'm going to be seriously exerting myself physically, I will opt to sleep in a bed if that's an option. You get better sleep. Better sleep equates to better performance, means you get to the lake faster, means more fish. So yeah, I like camping. Yeah, I like backpacking, but I am not above sitting in a hot tub and going to bed at 9 in a nice warm hotel bed so that I can get up and pound the trail the next day, if that is a possibility. And in this case, it was a possibility. So I booked the room, I spent the money, and I was ready to rock. The first part of the week, I went to work, I did my thing, yada, yada. And then the day rolled around for me to finish up at the office, hop in the truck, and drive up to this mountain town to spend the night, get ready for the big hike the next day to this lake so I could finally cross it off my list. But it wasn't really a normal day. That was a particularly brutal day for me in a couple of different ways. I took some pretty serious gut punches on the business side as far as clients making various considerations and budget determinations and things that sort of caught me off guard. So I was dealing with that. I had some relational stuff going on with my significant other during this time that was really not the best and was stressing me out big time. I don't know. I mean, I'm sure all of you have had pretty nasty fights with your significant other And they can really trip you up and mess you up. I was physically pretty beat and pretty tired. I had hit it a little too hard in the gym the week before. I was a little bit sore, joints were feeling a little bit unsteady, and I just was sort of not in the best physical condition. I was low on sleep, in part because of all of the stress and other stuff going on, and yada, 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 yada. So as I drove up there, it was a long drive. I had quite a bit of time to think, and I just wasn't really in a very good place. So got up to the town, had a nice dinner, stayed in the bed and breakfast, and was like, you know what? Tomorrow's a new day. I'm going to go to the lake. It's going to help me out, and I'm going to be better. It's going to be worth it. So I went to bed at about 9 o'clock, or at least I tried to. I proceeded to wake up probably 4 or 5 times over the course of the night, and then woke up at my target time of 4 a.m., probably on, I don't know, 3.5 hours of sleep, maybe 4 if I was really lucky. Got out of bed on time, rolled out of bed in the dark, put on my stuff, grabbed my energy drink. Yeah, I'm not above energy drinks if I'm going to start hiking something that brutal at 4 in the morning. Walked outside the room, it's like a little motel bed and breakfast thing. And instantly, the sky's still dark, can't see anything. And instantly I'm wet. My head is wet. I'm bald, so I notice pretty quickly when my head gets wet. My face is wet, and I'm wet. And I'm like, what the hell why am I wet? What's going on? I'm like half awake. I don't know what's going on. And slowly it dawns on me over a few seconds that it's raining outside. Now, I had checked the forecast the night before, right before I went to bed. I checked the forecast just like I always do, and I checked it for that specific lake. And the National Weather Service said, yeah, you're going to be good for the morning. Should be all clear. Maybe a thunderstorm in the afternoon, but you might get lucky. So it looked great. Perfect window. And I walk out the door at 4 in the morning, and it's pouring rain. So I get in my truck. I start the truck. I pull up the forecast again, and lo and behold, they have revised the forecast in the, 7 hours since I went to sleep. And now it's saying storms in the morning, followed by even more violent storms in the afternoon, which I'm up there. I spent the money on this place. I'm like mentally prepared for it, or at least I thought I was. I'm ready to rock. And now I have this shitty forecast. So got out of the truck, huffed and puffed a little bit, went back inside, laid back in bed, was pretty mad about it for a while, and was like, all right, you know what? I'll come up with an alternate plan, and went back to sleep. I woke up again at about 6, got up, went outside. It was light by then, sun was up, and I look over toward the mountain I was supposed to be climbing, and there is a big, dark thunderstorm just rolling across that mountain. And this is at like 6:30 in the morning, which is crazy, even in the mountains. And I'm watching that thing happen, and I'm like, man, I would have hiked pretty much face first into that thing in the dark, most likely. And the timing was such that it likely would have hit me right about as I was breaking tree line. So after the worst part of that elevation gain, I would have walked out onto the tundra and gotten just clapped by this storm, which at the very least could have been, a signal to me that I had to turn around and go all the way back down, which would be terrible after putting that work into it. Or at the worst, depending on where I was, could pin me down in a meadow unexpectedly. And now I'm in real trouble, right? Hail, lightning, hypothermia, getting stuck in alpine thunderstorms. There's really, really not something you want to do. And so I'm looking at it, and I'm like, man, that is just brutal. And that thing came boiling over the mountain, and then it came just ripping down the main street of this little mountain town and just dumping rain. So the people eating outside of the breakfast joint were running inside. Rain was beating on the windows. It's like raining sideways. There's lightning going on, and the peaks were just completely swallowed by this storm. And I was sitting there eating my scrambled eggs and some toast. It was really pretty good, to be honest with you. Sipping coffee and watching this thing and going, man, I just was really not meant to be on that mountain today. I just wasn't. And as I thought that, I realized that in truth, I had already kind of had that thought the day before, right? I was like, man, I'm kind of a mess emotionally. I'm mentally exhausted from the work stuff and everything else. I'm physically tired. Maybe I shouldn't be doing this. And then the ego part of me, right? The rugged backcountry man part came in and said, well, you know what, Ross, just, don't be a you-know-what. Get yourself ready to go and get your ass up the mountain, because that's what you do. And I said, oh, okay, yes, sir. But I had that little niggle in the back of my brain that was like, maybe maybe you shouldn't be going, dude. Maybe not. And sure enough, I woke up the next day, and just in case I didn't get the message the night before, which I didn't, the mountain sent me an even clearer one that was, hey, stay the hell off me today. It's not your day. So what did I do? I waited for the weather to clear. It cleared up by about 9:30 in the morning. I made a different plan. I went to a lower elevation stream, which turned out to be absolutely glorious. It was on the backside of that same range, so I could actually see the mountain that I was supposed to be on as I was fishing this little stream for brook trout. And I watched 5 full storm lines come across those peaks and absolutely smash the lake I was supposed to be at. And I don't mean just kinda. I mean, like, they enveloped the peaks and swallowed them whole and probably blew those things up with incredibly violent thunderstorms that I was just watching roll through one after another as I fished this valley. And you know what? As frustrated as I was about missing the lake, I knew this was where I was supposed to be today. It wasn't my first choice, but I wound up having a glorious day in a beautiful place. The mountain did its thing. I left it alone. And that was the right thing. It was the right decision. And that really got me thinking about this. I mean, there are just certain times that you need to not go. There are. And look, we're going to talk about these, sort of working our way through the obvious ones to the less obvious ones. But I want to give you kind of a guide and idea of when you need to be listening to that little voice that says, not today, buddy. Because if you don't get that voice correct, if you don't dial that in, you're eventually going to wind up putting yourself in a bad spot in one way or another. And it is important. The more you do this stuff, the more you learn to listen to yourself, trust what you're hearing, and the more you're going to be equipped to make better decisions based on you as a whole person, rather than just being like, don't be get up there and go do your thing. We all need to be more mature than that, including me. I'm still working on it. It's not a skill that I've mastered, but I do think that I've gotten better at it over the years. And I just kind of want to run through these things. I bet you've had a lot of these happen to you before. You'll probably be nodding along to some of them. And if you haven't, give it some time, my guy, because life comes for us all. It's coming for you too, I promise. So the first one is really obvious, right? Weather conditions. One way the mountain can say no to you is by giving you shitty weather conditions. So that could be like what I had, where you have these catastrophic thunderstorms that are starting really early, like 10 in the morning. Especially if they're starting early and you're doing a long hike and you know that these things are going to hit you during your climbing window, or they might hit you during your climbing window, or they might roll over the top of those cirques while you're at the lake. I mean, keep in mind, those storms come over quick, right? So like you could be fishing one minute under blue sky, and suddenly, because you can't see behind those big cirques and behind the ridge lines, you have a thunderhead roll up on you, and you have, in 10 minutes, it goes from sunny blue skies and a little bit of wind to like the apocalypse up there, and you need to be gone. So one way is just the weather conditions, and you need to get really good at always checking the weather. Of course, you've heard me say that a million times, but really paying attention to the weather and being realistic with yourself about it, right? So if you have a hike that you know is going to take 4 hours, you know that realistically you're not going to be on the trailhead until 8 in the morning, and you know that there are storms forecast as early as 11 a.m., that's probably an indication you're not supposed to be on that mountain that day. Now, could you go and get away with it? Yeah, you could maybe go and get away with it. But that's a whisper, right? That's the mountain saying, no, it's not lining up today. It's not the right day. You should go somewhere else. It's a good chance for you to look for backups. You should always have backups anyway, because shit happens when you're backcountry fly fishing. But that is an indication that maybe you ought not to be going. And it's a pretty obvious one, right? Weather is a huge thing when you're out there. And anybody who spent a lot of time outdoors knows that. So don't neglect that piece. The other one is your physical state. Okay, so, I mean, these all, pretty much every backcountry location, well, not every, there are some you can drive to, but, most of them require hiking. And probably quite a bit of hiking over quite a bit of terrain, quite a bit of distance, quite a bit of elevation gain. And that requires you to be at least somewhat physically capable. You don't have to be an athlete. You don't have to be a trail runner. You don't have to be a marathoner. But you need to be in good enough shape to hit those trails and be able to hike and get to these places, not just in general, but within those windows of times that you're not getting caught up there above tree line after noon. And that sort of factors in a whole bunch of different pieces, right? So You could have, and I've had days like this too, where you just didn't get any sleep the night before. Maybe your kids were up and they were keeping you up. Maybe you didn't feel great. Maybe you were stressed and thinking about something. Maybe your neighbor was playing disco music. I mean, I don't know what could have happened to you, but maybe you just didn't get enough sleep and you're kind of blasted. And look, I mean, you're going to be tired on a lot of these hikes because they involve getting up at like 4 in the morning or even earlier. So that's part of it. And I'm not saying you should never hike tired, because the reality is if you never hike tired, you're probably not going to be doing a lot of hiking, at least not to those really high elevation lakes. But there's a difference between tired, like, I didn't get enough sleep today and I'm really looking forward to a nap after I finish this, and exhausted, where you can't keep your eyes open. You feel mentally foggy. You are struggling to get your muscles to wake up and you just feel like you're just not good to go. That feeling is one that you should really pay attention to. It means that you're not going to be at your best. It means that you're going to go slower than you usually do. It can mean that you're sloppy and you slip and, roll an ankle or hurt yourself or twist a knee. It can lead you to make bad decisions, right? So if you don't get a lot of sleep, your cognitive abilities go down pretty quickly. Couple that with altitude, which we talked about before, leads to cognitive decline while you're up there. You can make some pretty bad calls in places where making bad calls can be very, very costly to you and to others. So lack of sleep is one of the physical things that might be the mountain saying, hey, bud, why don't you get some rest and come back tomorrow or next week or next month or whatever. Ditto for your sort of physical fatigue from a muscular perspective, right? So, I mean, I lift a lot of weights. I do other stuff. And sometimes I am just blasted. Like my legs are blown up or my butt's blown up or my back hurts because I lifted a little bit too heavy or whatever it might be. And all of those things, same thing. I mean, you're carrying a pack, right? Which is going to require the use of your glutes and your hamstrings and your quads and your back and your shoulders. And if you can't get your muscles okay, you're going to have a bad time hiking, right? These are the hikes that you go on where your legs feel like cement. You can't quite get them working. They never really warm up. They feel tight and achy the whole way up. They slow you down even on inclines that really shouldn't be a big deal for you. They affect your stride length and a whole bunch of other things. They could lead to injury once again. That kind of muscular stuff, if you're like, man, I hit it too hard, that can be the mountain telling you no. Like if you feel just totally physically shattered, that might not be the day to go push that 3,500 feet of elevation gain or 4,000 feet of elevation gain. It might not be the day to lug a 50-pound backpacking pack 10 miles into the woods and camp. It might not be the day to really push yourself at high altitude. There are just a lot of things there that you got to be careful about. Now, that's not to say that you can't ever hike tired or hike sore. Of course you can, and we all do at some point. But again, you got to listen to that voice. There is a difference between I'm kind of tired and sore and I'm running at like 60%. My body's blown up. My muscles don't have any glycogen in them. I haven't eaten right. I didn't recover well from my last workout. Those are signals to you that maybe you need to be taking it easy and you don't need to be going up to something that's quite that strenuous. You can find something else, right? Go cross off a lower elevation creek. Or even take a rest day, right? And there are some days where you feel so bad that it just makes sense to rest and not to hit the mountain that day. That is a physical signal to you that maybe the mountain's telling you no for that day. You need to pay attention to it. You got to find the balance. But if you really are feeling like you got hit by a freight train, might be a good chance for you to reconsider heading up there, at least for that particular day. And then beyond those more obvious things, you have less obvious stuff that could be an indication to you that the mountain is saying no. The first one is your general mental state. So everybody has stuff happen in their life. So work stress, health stress, family stress, personal stress, financial stress, whatever. You're going to have stuff happen to you. I don't believe you when you say that you don't. So all you people are like, no, my life's great. That never happens. No, it's not true. You have days where bad things are happening and you're stressed out and distracted and thinking about them. And that is another indication that maybe you need to be careful, because when your brain has a capacity limit. And when your brain is occupied with thinking about, in my case, this sort of serious business issue and financial issue that I'm having because of a couple of decisions from clients or because of something that happened with someone I work with or whatever it might be, that can sort of crowd out useful and important space in your brain. Same thing if you're, trying to really work through something with your family, like you've got some kind of problem and you're chewing on it. Maybe you're stuck on whether or not you should go back to school or get a certificate or something that your kid said or whatever it might be. Maybe you're trying to make a plan for something. Maybe you have a big work project that's on your mind, whatever. If your brain is full of other stuff to the point that it distracts you, because again, you always have other things going on. And of course, part of the reason we're out there is to help work through and process and deal with those other things. But there's a difference between that, which, you have enough of it in there that you can still hold space to be present in these wild places and use the two together to sort of find a solution. And you just don't have any mental capacity because you're distracted, right? There's a difference between having stuff to deal with and being distracted. If you are distracted, you are inviting trouble for a few reasons. The first one being that being distracted will make you not very good at planning these trips. And these trips do require a fair amount of thoughtful planning if you want to be successful. Looking at the map, looking at the trail, trying to lay out a route if there is no trail, looking at the forecast, building a plan, thinking about what the fish are going to be doing, timing and tactics and gear and yada, 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 yada. There's a lot that goes into it. And if you're not really putting the effort into that because you're spending all of your time and energy spinning on whatever you happen to be spinning on, that can really hurt you once you get out the door. Poor planning leads to poor performance, and you can get yourself in trouble by being distracted before you ever even walk out the door and hop in the car. And you can get yourself in trouble before you ever even hop in the car. The second thing is that once you're out there, you might not be paying attention, right? So we've all been on hikes where you're walking along and you're zoned out. You're thinking about, what she said to you, or you're thinking about what your credit card balance is, or you're thinking about your next business move, or you're thinking about the fact that you just got laid off, or whatever that might be. And as a result, you're not paying attention. You're not looking around you. You're not watching the sky. You're not really dealing with the immediacy of your surroundings, and you're not really fully present with your surroundings. And in addition to sort of depriving you of the joy of being in these places, which has a lot to do with being mentally present in them, you are potentially putting yourself at risk because you're not paying attention, right? This is how you accidentally miss the storm clouds coming down on top of you, or the bear with her cubs sitting right off the side of the trail, or the rock that you didn't see because you were zoned out and staring off into space like a zombie and then you twisted your ankle, or whatever it might be. Being distracted up there can be very, very bad news for you. You need to be mentally present. And if you're not mentally present, if you are distracted, if you are so full of other stuff, that little voice in the back of your head that goes, boy, you sure have a lot in your head today. Are you sure you really have this? Are you sure this is a good idea? Are you sure you can make the hike in that time? Are you sure you have everything that you need? That voice is the mountain telling you that maybe you shouldn't be up there today. Maybe you need to have a different level of mental capacity. Maybe you need to have your mind a little bit clearer. But that can be a signal that you just need to spend some time getting your shit together, sorting your stuff out, and putting yourself into a position where you can not be distracted and go up and have the productive experience of actually working through that stuff and processing that stuff, as opposed to letting that stuff get in the way, take you out of the moment, and potentially put you in a bad situation because you just weren't equipped to be mentally with it out there on the mountain. And very closely related to that is your emotional state. Okay, so yeah, you have emotions, and I know you're probably a big, handsome fly fisherman. I bet you have a beard. Maybe you can deadlift 7,000 pounds. I don't know, whatever. I mean, I'm sure you're very rugged. I'm also sure that you have emotions, and I'm sure that you have things going on in your life that create and trigger those emotions for you. And those emotions go with you out into the wild. And this one is important because it is related to some extent to your mental state. Of course, all those things that can affect your mental state will also affect your emotional state. But this one's different because it's a little bit deeper, right? Like your mental state is you actively spinning on and thinking on something and being distracted. It's an obvious thing. It's an observable thing if you're really paying attention to it. Your emotional state, though, is not quite so obvious. So going back to my story earlier, I had a pretty serious disagreement with my significant other, and that led me to not be in a great place emotionally, on top of what was going on with the business, on top of some other stuff going on with my kids, on top of, just being in a general sort of melancholy state because, there's just a bunch of stuff going on. And that emotional state, it goes with you out there. I talked in the first episode of the season about the fact that the wild reflects back to you what you bring into it. And I do think that that's true, but I don't think it's just that it reflects it back to you. I also think that it amplifies it back to you. So, if you're carrying in emotional load about a death in the family or a relationship issue or whatever, some type of emotional stress or strain, the wild is not only going to reflect that back to you, it's going to amplify it for you. And once you get out there alone and you've got nobody with you except for your own thoughts and the trees and the bugs and the birds, you are going to potentially start catching some bigger waves than you think, right? So I always think of emotions kind of like waves. They come in usually kind of quick and close together when something first happens, and then slower and further apart, as time goes on. But the other thing is, sometimes, like, have you ever been standing on a beach and there's normal waves and they're lapping against your thighs, but every now and then you get a wave that's like up to your head, right? And it just totally swamps you. Your emotions are like that too. And your job is to be able to stand on the metaphorical beach, let the normal waves come in. Those are perfectly fine. Take those with you out there. The wild is a great place to process those things and think about them and learn to live with them and deal with them and control them. But pay attention to those big waves. And if you're feeling a big wave, maybe you're really sad about something. It could be you're incredibly sad about a breakup, or you're incredibly sad about some type of terrible health news, or a death in the family, or the death of a pet, or whatever it might be. You probably don't want to be off by yourself at the peak of that, when the waves are their biggest and the closest together, because sometimes that'll trip you up a little bit. It has physical effects, so being emotionally exhausted will definitely make you physically exhausted as well. It has mental effects because it does sort of cloud your judgment and your ability to correctly perceive what's going on around you and make decisions. And it can lead you to some pretty dark places. So for the most part, I go to the wilderness to clear my head, to process things, to get myself into a better place. But sometimes if you go at the wrong moment, it can lead you down some pretty dark roads, right? There are days where the isolation and the silence are not helpful and are not your friends, and instead feel oppressive. They feel like you're being kind of crushed, right? So I had an experience like this actually earlier this summer. I was in a canyon down in southern Colorado that I had never been to before, entirely off trail. So I was bushwhacking in there. I was in a pretty questionable emotional state the day that I went in there for a number of different reasons. And it was a beautiful place. I mean, it was off the charts gorgeous, just incredible. And it was also just crushingly lonely and sad. It was the way it felt for me. Anybody who spends a lot of time outside knows that's what happens sometimes. Some days you go out and the isolation is beautiful and it's reinvigorating and you feel alive and like you're challenging yourself and doing something great. And other times it feels like you are the only person left on the earth. You are beyond lonely, and it can become a pretty serious mental and emotional strain on you. And that's not to say that you're going to do something silly and like jump off of a cliff, right? Although that does happen on a fairly regular basis out there, unfortunately. It just means that you're going to have kind of a rough time. And I've had days where I was in a bad enough emotional state that I really probably should have just called it off and done something different that day or whatever. Went anyway and came back down feeling worse and more beat up than I did when I went. Doesn't happen often. Most of the time the wilderness is my cathedral and my sanctuary. Most of the time it helps me feel better. But if I hit it wrong, if I don't listen to the mountain saying, hey, you're a mess emotionally, bud, and you need to stay home. If I don't listen to that voice and I go anyway, then I get a loudspeaker of emotion and I start catching those big old waves because it was not the right day to be out there. And it can mess with you, and it can mess with your head. I have definitely had days where you come back and you're like, woof, man, I did not like that place. I did not like the experience. I felt just watched or totally alone or depressed or whatever. Those are not good days to be out there by yourself, because they can tip you into some unhelpful and potentially pretty dark thoughts. And at the very least, it's going to make it not all that enjoyable for you, which sucks, because at the end of the day, we do want to have a good time out there. We want to enjoy ourselves. So your emotional state matters, and it might not just be sadness. So yeah, I mean, you might be sad, but you might also be angry, right? So I know that one of my weaknesses is that when I'm really pissed off about something and I'm like, oh, I can't believe that he did that or she did that or this is happening. If I'm really mad about it, I have this tendency to push really, really, really hard. It's almost like, man, if I'm really mad and I go to the gym and I just lift really, really heavy, I'm going to be better, right? Or if I just go out there and I crush that hike at like 3.5 miles an hour, I'm going to be better, right? Or if I just push through it and get to that thing way off trail, like I said I was going to, then I'm going to feel better. And to some extent, that can be good, right? You can harness that thing and you can use it to sort of drive you out there. So that, as with all things, it's not always bad. But if you go too far down that road, it can lead you to push too hard. And pushing too hard is something that a lot of people don't pay attention to. But not knowing how to be reasonable, not knowing your limitations, and pushing for the wrong reasons when you shouldn't are a great way to get yourself hurt, to get yourself lost, to get yourself into a bad situation of one kind or another, into a place you shouldn't be in, a situation that you shouldn't be in. It's not a good thing to do. Anger is not a helpful emotion. It does not make good decisions. This is why people tell you not to make decisions when you're angry, because they're probably not very good decisions. And that's true when you're out there as well. So if you're really pissed off, if you had the world's most cataclysmic fight with your wife or your girlfriend or your boyfriend or whatever, or somebody screwed you at work or you got fired unfairly or politics happened, I don't know, pick a thing. Be careful about that, because there are times where your emotional state will drive you in ways that could be harmful. And you need to be able to recognize that and to know that that might mean that emotional state, those waves are the mountain's way of saying, you need to cool off a little bit before you come up here and really, really appreciate me. And going along with that, pushing yourself and going to these places to suffer on purpose, also not healthy, right? I have a habit of doing this. I do it at the gym. I do it as a sort of general thing in my life. I'm a big believer in discipline. I'm a big believer in routine, big believer in sticking with stuff, even if you're not really in the mood for it. But there is a difference between discipline and allowing yourself to suffer in service to an objective and going out there to punish yourself, right? So I have definitely caught myself after a really bad day. Maybe I really made a bad mistake or I screwed up, whatever. And I'm really, really mad. And I go out there and I just pound my body. I mean, I'm crushing the trail. I'm flying around. I'm doing this. I'm doing that. I'm taking risks I shouldn't. And all of that is like me, I guess sort of self-flagellating a little bit, right? Like I'm whipping myself and I'm punishing myself for whatever bad thing has happened. And that's not a good thing to do out in the wilderness. You want to go do that in the gym? Go do it in the gym. You want to get a crop whip and smack yourself around with it because you're a dummy and you made some shitty decisions? Have fun. Knock yourself out. Don't go too hard, because that would be a real embarrassing hospital trip. But out in the wilderness, it's not the best place to do that. There's not a lot of margin for screwing up, especially if you're alone. It can go really bad really quickly. And sometimes you need to ask yourself, am I going out there to heal and to grow and to get better and to move in the right direction? Or am I going out there to punish myself or to suffer for whatever reason? Because I feel like if I can just sweat hard enough or bleed hard enough, then I'll be better and I'll feel better. If the former, cool, go, right? I mean, the healing power of the wilderness is kind of what we're in it for. But if it's the latter, it might be time to stay home. That could be the mountain's way of saying, I don't think so, dude. That's not good for you. And you need to stay off today. Just cool off, get yourself straight, come back to me when you're coming to me for the right reasons. and not when you just want to make yourself bleed for whatever reason. And so that kind of covers the emotional stuff, right? And then there's one more category, which is basically, and I'm going to have to beep this out, so excuse me, but I call it who the knows, right? So this is when, for whatever reason, you just feel like you shouldn't go. And I'm not talking about normal pre-trip jitters, right? I mean, it's normal to be kind of nervous before you go to a new place. It's normal to be a little nervous before you do a hard hike, especially if you're doing it solo. If you're newer to this stuff, of course, being a little bit nervous is very normal and expected. But there's a difference between normal jitter and nervousness and your intuition screaming at you that you shouldn't go. Okay, and we're going to have an interview later on this season with the former FBI agent who talks all about the power of intuition and trusting your gut and the ability of your subconscious mind to gather and take in and aggregate all of these data that you're not really paying attention to in any conscious sense and put them together and go, ooh, that's a threat and that's not good and we need to get out of here. You need to learn how to listen to that intuition. And that means that when you have a day where you just really don't think you should go, you need to be paying attention to that. So I had a trip last summer where I went way off trail to a number of lakes, way, way, way up by the divide. Very, very few people have ever fished these lakes. It took me forever to route the map. I was heavily invested in it. It was a long backpacking trip. And I went up there, and I passed this weird sort of old glacial tarn on the way up to those lakes. And I did not like that place. I mean, the second I got close to it, I had the heebie-jeebies, and we're talking like the hair standing up on the back of my neck, this sort of sense of impending doom, this tightness in the chest, this sort of panicky feeling. And I have no idea what it was. I didn't see anything, at least not consciously. I didn't hear anything, at least not consciously. There was no obvious reason for me to feel that way, but I did feel that way. And so I shot past that lake. I made it to the lakes I was going to. Didn't turn out to be a great day because I got like 10 minutes to fish and then got blown off by a thunderstorm. So, yeehaw. But I came all the way back down and I was like, well, I guess I'll have to go back and, cross this one off the list again. And I tried 3 more times over the course of that summer to go back and do that hike. And every time the night before I went, I would lay awake in bed and I would be completely unable to sleep. I mean, I would just be riddled with anxiety. And I'm a guy who does this all the time, right? I'm out there 100 days a year. I've spent thousands of days of my life in these places. I don't get terribly nervous. I don't really get very anxious about them. They're really, I can count on one hand the number of places I've ever been to that made me uncomfortable. And this is the only place that has ever given me that what the hell is wrong with that place vibe. And I still don't know. I don't. I can't articulate what's wrong with it. I can't tell you what's wrong with it. Could it have been an animal? Maybe. Could it have been a person? Maybe. Could it be something else that I can't explain? Maybe. I don't know. I don't know. And I'll probably never know, right? Because so much of that is beyond our realm of understanding. But I know that something was wrong. And I know that that wasn't pre-trip jitters. I know that that was my intuition saying, oh, hell no, you're not going back to that place. And so after the 3rd attempt, I was like, you know what? I don't know what it is, but I'm just going to listen to it. The mountain's telling me I'm not supposed to be there. There's something wrong with that place. I'm just not going to go back. And that sucks because I missed out on the lakes. I missed out on the golden trout, which were in the lakes. That's why I was up there. But it was the right call because I listened to my intuition and I was able to hear the mountain saying, not that place. Just stay away. That's not for you. There's something there that you don't need to be dealing with. And I'm really glad that I did. Disappointed on one hand, sure. But also eminently glad that I was able to register that, recognize that, and listen to it, and stay home or go somewhere else when I was feeling like, I really got to get up there and prove something to myself, because I could end really badly, right? And I do believe that for whatever reason, it just wasn't meant to be, and trying to force stuff that's not meant to be, it's not going to lead to good outcomes. We all know that. Sometimes we just need to make peace with it and acknowledge it. So there you have it, guys. That is sort of my take on when you shouldn't go. What you do when the mountain says no. What you do when you hear that little voice in your head that says, not today, find a different day, do something else. And I really hope that as you grow into this sport, as you grow into the backcountry aspects of this sport, or even if you've been doing it for a long time, the more that you can start to pay attention to that and to learn that kind of rhythm and that kind of voice, the better off you're going to be. You're going to have more fun out there. You're going to have better days. You're going to have fewer bad days. And more importantly, you're going to be safer. And you just are going to be better off for paying attention to those days when the mountain says no and you ought to stay home. So I hope you enjoyed listening to this one. I know it was a little bit different, but I do think it's an important topic that's worth talking about. We will be back next week with a discussion about what happens when you make bad decisions, called Play Stupid Games, Win Stupid Prizes, in which I will regale you with many stories of me screwing up, which happens on a pretty regular basis because I am not the smartest man on the planet. I routinely ignore my own advice, and I sometimes make bad decisions that, in some cases, have almost led to really serious problems. So next week's episode is going to be all about how dumb I am and how you should not be dumb. So buckle up for that one. That'll be fun. The week after that, we'll be talking about spot burning. Here's the spoiler alert. Spot burning sucks, and you shouldn't do it because it kind of ruins awesome places that don't need to be ruined. But teaser trailer for that one. If you didn't like Complaint Corner, I'm real sorry, but I got more complaints, and we're going to talk about it here in a couple weeks. In the meantime, guys, I hope that you are crushing it out there. Hope you're listening to the mountain, telling you go or no go. Hope you're catching those fish. Hope you're getting some really good fish pictures. Feel free to send them my way if you're ever interested. Facebook, Instagram, Backcountry Fly Fishing Podcast at gmail.com. Love hearing from you. But no matter what, I hope you're enjoying the season and spending as much time out in the backcountry as you possibly can, ripping lips. I will see you back here real soon. Till next time, this is Ross. Maybe I'll see you out there. Unless the mountain told me to stay the f*** home.